All right, first session we're going to do today, and this is going to be a little bit of a longer session. The more I prayed over it, the more I looked through it. I want to make sure that we took our time with this session. So we're going to do the session. Number 2 is fight fair. Okay? What do I mean by that, fight fair? We talked about it a little bit last night. It is absolutely inevitable that you guys are going to have problems. We all do. Each and every one of us. We're two completely different people that have been welded and merged into one creation by God. So, of course, anytime two things collide, there's friction, and sometimes there could even be chaos. But what we want to do is just help you walk through this in a healthy manner. So, are y'all ready? Yeah. All right, so let me give you this. Number 1 principle when it comes to fighting fair is bring it down a notch. If you've ever watched Austin Powers, you know what I'm talking about, okay? Dr. Evil, bring it down a notch. All right, so bring it down a notch. What do I mean by that? James 1, 19 through 20. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick. Not half of you, not only the husbands, not only the wives, not only when you feel like it, but you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So if we look at this backwards, we see this. God is desiring something from all of us, and he's wanting righteousness. And what the word righteousness means is to be in the right standing with God. So if we want to be in the right standing with God, then we've got to make sure that we're not producers of human anger. Because when we get angry, often, almost every single time, we're going to say things that we don't mean, say things we shouldn't say, and we're going to hurt one another. So how do we keep ourselves, if we keep reading it backwards, how do we keep ourselves from getting angry? It means that we are slow to speak, and that we are quick to listen, and that we are understanding. Are you hearing me today? So when we are slow, if I'm slow to speak, if I'm quick to listen, sometimes when Melissa and I, when we get after our intense fellowship moments, I just get quiet. And then what sometimes happens is then she'll get quiet. And then sometimes we both get so quiet, then there's no resolution coming because we both know it's better for both of us not to just say something, right? And we're going to talk about that here in a minute, about how to resolve that. But this is so critical. You know, I'm half Italian, half Irish. You know, my ancestors loved to drink and loved to fight, right? And I grew up in a house full of drinking, drugs, and fighting. And so I came out of that, and I'll tell you, I think Melissa will absolutely agree with this. Hopefully she will. But I hate to argue. I once had a pastor come visit me and one of my best friends in the car with this pastor, and he's asking, how has Reach Church done what you've done? Like, what's going on there? Because we want to grow like you guys are growing. So I start to teach, just tell him what God's been doing here and the kind of family we have. And the whole time, all he wanted to do was argue every point that I was giving him. And I said, bro, either you want to listen or you don't. Either you're the one that asked me. I'm not trying to give you this information and force it on you. So either shut up and listen, or don't care, because I don't care to have to give it to you. And then he wanted to argue that point. And then I finally got to the point where human anger was coming out. And I said, bro, let me tell you something. I came out of a household of anger and arguing. I don't argue. I don't argue with my wife. I don't argue with my staff. I don't argue with my friends. And I'm surely not going to sit here while you're in my city, in my truck, asking me questions, argue with you. Until you want to grow up, shut up, right? So in the end, me and him became beautiful friends afterwards. I think he got it. But that's really, in the end, it's not in my nature to argue. For Melissa, it's not in her nature to argue, but it is in our nature to solve things before our new nature with Christ, to solve things with anger, right? And so I'll just tell you a little spicy story. I told you a little bit about this last night, just so you guys know. You know, we have now been married 24 years, going on 24 years this year. 23.
But we've been together for 2
No, I'm sorry, sweetheart. Let me just tell you, we were married in 1992. This is the year 2016. So this year we will be married 24.
Yes.
Oh.
We've been married for 23.
Oh, you said yes. Okay, we're saying the same thing in two different ways. See how we just resolved? Yes. We just resolved that little issue, right? But I'll tell you this fun little story. This is before I was saved, and this is when we were very first married. For the first year of our marriage, we saw each other just a couple months. I was deployed, came home. We moved down to North Carolina together, and Candace, just a little baby, and I was deployed again. This time it was a little bit short of a deployment. It was like a 3-month deployment. But I came home, and I was exhausted. We had been, telling you, sleeping like 2 or 3 hours a night at most, and just, taking a shower with a canteen out in the middle of the desert. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like, that stuff just didn't roll. So I came home dirty. I came home tired. I came home just completely wanting, and I dreamt of sleeping in my own bed. I come home. I come in with my Alice pack, my backpack. It's filled with dust. I've been out in the desert. All my camis are filled with dust. I come in. Melissa's OCD. Like, she has been delivered of that to a large degree. But let me just give you this little bit of information. She used to pull the refrigerator out. When the refrigerators used to have coils behind them, she would pull the refrigerator out once a week and clean it with a Q-tip. That's sick. You picking up what I'm laying down. So you're talking about a U.S. Marine 20-year-old man that doesn't even think like that, So I come home, I lay my dirty stuff at the foot of the bed, go and take a shower, and climb in the bed, and I fall into this deep sleep, and I wake up with this raging maniac. Here's how women see things. Let me just give you a quick tip. Men are like waffles, and women are like spaghetti. Men see everything compartmentalized. Women see everything connected together. So Melissa saw a dirty Alice pack and thought like this: I worked so hard to make this junky, jacked up, nasty, $350 a month payment trailer that we're living in outside the base look like a king's palace for you. And you don't even respect me and love me enough to pick up your stuff. That's what you think of me. So you think and then it just spun out of control in her mind while I was sleeping. She was hovering over me while I was sleeping. And
I can't even look at the crowd right now.
And then she woke me up in this, tirade, like, who do you think you are? I was like, drill instructor. I flew out, yes, sir, sir, no, sir. I just like, what the heck? And I'm like, what's the problem? And she's like, and she's just going through this. She had this like 15 thing linked together and just poof, it blew and somehow it went back to the garbage 4 months ago before I went on deployment. And I'm finally like, I just lost my temper. I start yelling at her. Do you know what I've just done? What I've just been through? I just need to get sleep. And they're just boiled. And it went back to the old high school days. Melissa was she's a spicy one. So she wanted to fight, right? I'm just going to tell you flat out, I don't believe in hitting women in any way, shape, or form. I saw my mother beat half to death by too many men, and I don't want any part of it. So I just made a commitment. I'm never going to put my hands on a woman. And so she didn't have that same commitment, She wanted to fight. And so
Can I kind of pick up the story?
Yes.
Yes, I was extremely angry. So I would start punching him, but I knew he would not punch back. And he always taught me to watch your surroundings, look around you, make sure when I'm not around you're defending our daughter, you're aware of everything around you. So I see we're in a bedroom. It's probably 200 square feet, if that. So I look at my surroundings.
Well, hold on. Let me tell her what happens first.
Yeah,
you're missing a point. No, hold on. What I did was I grabbed her. I twisted her around and grabbed her so her face was away from me, and I was just holding her. So I'm just holding her to calm her down. Didn't work.
So I look at this small room. All that I could do is I could see that I could scale my feet on those walls. So while he has me in a bear hug, I scaled my feet up on the walls and I gave the biggest push that I could with my legs, and I flew us both back into the bed.
No, it was into the corner of the dresser. My spine smacked right into the corner of the dresser. That hurt like a son of a, you know?
Yeah, I do remember hurting your back.
Yeah. Yeah. Out of reaction, I throw her onto the bed, just like soft place, get away from me. That just really hurt, kind of a deal. She lands on the bed and she goes, "You threw me on the bed." Yeah, you know, like, duh. So with all that said, what I'm telling you is I'm just telling you a stupid, funny story to let you know that there's no such thing as a perfect marriage that never has problems. Even though that was a long time ago for us and we've never had another incident, anything really like it in the history of our marriage, still, there's stuff that just happens. And you got to know how to walk through that and how to be patient with one another and work with one another to bring it down a notch. If you know what sets someone else off, don't push their buttons. Are you with me? Don't be an agitator and don't be an antagonist where you just know you're frustrated at them and instead of wanting to talk it out, you just want to push buttons just to get them to go off because it's not going to turn out good for either one of you. Do you agree?
Yes.
All right. Number 2, and how to fight fair is to watch your words. Words have power. Proverbs 18:21, the tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. That's good stuff right there. Watch your words. Do you know what a word curse is? A word curse is something that is defaming. It is something that is bringing down, degrading another person. You're stupid. You're ugly. You know, you always do this. You never do that. You know, word curse is speaking something over somebody's life. You're a loser. You know, blah, 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 blah. So a word curse is speaking something over someone's life. And the Bible talks very strongly about word curses, and they have so much power. They stick like glue to the soul. If you'll think about this, if any of you ever grew up in any kind of either abusive situation at home or under any kind of peer pressure or bullying at school, if you've ever been in any kind of environment, that old verbiage, you know, sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We teach that to our kids, the stupidest thing we ever taught. Because the truth is, their bones will heal, their scars will mend, but in the end, those words that have been spoken into their hearts, they stick like glue. And when you speak these kind of things to one another in your marriage, you're literally destroying the fabric of the bond that is between you. Just imagine like a sticky bomb. You're a Navy SEAL and you're just throwing it on the door and you're just waiting for it to go off. And the more, no matter how strong that door is, you keep sticking them, sooner or later there's going to be enough to blow that door off. Word curses should not be a part of your language. Watch your words with one another. The Bible says that everything that we say to each other should be uplifting, encouraging, and edifying. So there's a way to say, like if I was to say, when I was joking earlier about Melissa's OCD, like I wasn't joking, she really was OCD, but when I was joking about how crazy it was and her pulling out the refrigerator, that was true. But in the end, I didn't like make that a bad thing about her. I didn't sit there and speak word curses against her to help her to get through that. I just told her, baby, you are so busy. You have so much going on. We're raising a child. You're working. I'm working. Honey, don't you think that there's a way to better do this and still be satisfied? Because like that dust behind the refrigerator, like I know that nobody sees it and you know that it's there. But I mean, if you, then I thought I was doing good. I said, if you really think about what's underneath the carpet and between the, and she goes, is there a way to pull the car? And I'm like, oh my gosh. But in the end, we work through, you know what I mean? I'm giving you a small example, but you just got to work through things with love, right? You got married because you love each other. And let me speak on word curses. Don't do that stupid stuff of the only reason why I married you is because. Because if that's the truth, you're an idiot. If you only married them because of this one reason, then you're a fool. Really, that's what it is. But the truth is, if you're honest with God, honest with yourself, that's really not the only reason why you married them. There was a lot of reasons why you married them. Now, there might have been some that have more emphasis and weight, but in the end, when you make it like it's like somebody coming to you in the church. You know, this has happened in churches all around the world. Somebody comes in the church and it's one of your friends in the life group, and they say, "Ooh, man, you know, everybody saw you fall and make a fool of yourself on Sunday morning walking out in the parking lot." And you're like, "Oh my God, everybody?" Yeah, everybody. They're all talking about it. And then if you would ask them, "Who's everybody?" Well, there was me and Sue. And Sue saw it. So you and Sue are everybody? Well, I mean, I'm sure everybody, no. So you and Sue are everybody? Yeah. But Sue actually called me afterwards and said, "Don't feel embarrassed. It's happened to everyone. I just did it 3 weeks ago, blah, 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 blah." Are you with me? We have that tendency to jump. Humanity does this. If we look at government, you look at institutions, you look at anything. When something's out of balance, we have an unhealthy habit of swinging the pendulum all the way to the other side instead of just working slow and hard to get to center. Are you with me? You got anything to add on that, baby? No. And number 3, sign the peace treaty. Ephesians 4:26. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. Are you hearing that today? Yeah. Don't sin by letting anger control you. There's a difference between losing your temper. Don't walk out here today, and if one of you lose your temper, then, "Oh my God, didn't you hear Pastor said we did the marriage agreement?" Yeah, we're all normal. We're all human. We're all going to do that. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have dumb moments. But if it is a lifestyle, if you're just a volatile person, that's when it becomes a sin, a lifestyle of sin. But for all of us, the Word of God is teaching here, don't let the sun go down on your anger. In other words, here's how simple it is. So you have a fight. You have an intense fellowship moment. You have an engagement where neither can come to a conclusion. You may not even be able to resolve it right there that day, but you can at least kill the anger. Are you hearing me? You can come to a point of peace where you may just, for now, agree to disagree. And let's talk about it tomorrow. Let's not worry about it right now. Melissa and I do this a lot. We really do. And the truth is, most times we don't even end up talking about it anymore because the next morning we wake up and we either forget about it or thought, "Well, that was stupid." You know what I mean? Or there's times where we wake up the next day and, you know, we know now not to hit, as soon as you wake up, pop, "Hey, do you remember what we were talking about yesterday?" You know, but we wait for a little bit and then we'll say, "Hey, can we visit this? Let's visit this again. What took place yesterday?" Da, 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 da. But I'm telling you, honestly, from the depths of my heart, it is probably one of the most damaging things that you can do to your marriage is to go to bed. Don't do this. Don't do the pouting thing. This is what I'll tell you what Melissa used to do. And then I'll tell you what I used to do, okay? Before I was saved, all right? What Melissa used to do before I was saved too is when we would argue, she would walk out. Not of the room, of the house. And she would just roam the neighborhood. And then I'd worry about her, you know? Like, is she okay? She's a young, pretty girl walking around. We don't live in the best of the neighborhood. Then I'm out in the car driving on the street. I'm like, "Come on, babe, get in the car." She's like, you know? And then I'm like, at least I got words, you know? "Okay, baby, that's good. Let's start. But come on, please, just get in the car." And then she'll just look back at me with this look. She'll go, and then she just keep walking. And then I begged her, "Please, I worry for you, danger. Then I got to put Candace in the car. I got to come looking for you. Like, come on." And so she's okay. So the next time what she did, she would go out and she'd just sit on the porch, or she'd walk around the back of the house where I'd think she was out roaming the neighborhood, right? Yeah.
The good old days. No, I'm just joking. So joking.
I know you are. And then here's what I would do. This is before Jesus. I would call up the boys and go to the bar. come home late at night, leave her wondering if I'm okay. Are you hearing me? It's just stupid. All that stupid little silly stuff, guys, it's just immaturity. And you're not perfect, we get it. But when you can avoid doing those big things that threaten, because we're going to talk about this a little bit today, but there's only 3 things. We talk about this in marriage, premarital counseling, and in marriage counseling a lot. There's 3 things that have to be protected. Every human being, their primal need, their primal instinct is survival. The building's on fire, you're getting out. You're not going in, right? Gunshots go off, you're hitting the deck. You're not running towards them. That's what makes heroes, is they put their life in danger for others. So we never want to threaten survival of one another. And the way that we do that is by adultery, by abandonment, by leaving one another stranded, not knowing where the other one's at, and by abuse. And abuse is not just physical abuse. Abuse is emotional abuse, and abuse is verbal abuse. Now, I'm going to be very clear. Verbal abuse is not someone losing their temper at you once. That's not verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is somebody beating you down every day of your life and making you feel like you're not worth living. Are you hearing me? We can never threaten those things. If we do, I promise you, your marriage can come through it. It absolutely can. We've seen it over and over again. God worked miracles with God. With humans, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible, but you're up against a very tall order, right? And then the primal need of every woman is to feel secure, to feel loved. And so we've got to make sure, we'll talk about that in just a minute here, as men, that we give our ladies that. And then the primal need of a man is significance, it's respect. So the ladies, we've got to be able to give our men that. And so when we look at those 3 S's, the significance, the security, and the survival, and we balance it, I promise you this, 99.9999% of every single problem in every single marriage will always boil down to one of those 3 things being threatened. And if we can avoid the big pitfalls, or even if we stepped into one, but we can come back to center and find where that was, that is usually the best and the greatest way to be able to work through it. Are y'all with me? Baby, you got anything?
I just want to recap on what you said about we know the buttons to push on our spouses. We know what makes them angry, and be very careful not to do that. Even though I would say you've done so good to tame yourself down with the way, yes, it is true. I fell in love with Chris the first time I saw him fight. So we're all family here, right? There is that side in me that sometimes would like to see him just put the boot to somebody physically. Can I tell a story that's even happened since we were in Texas?
Oh, Texas. Oh.
But cameras would prove that you would be in the right. But we had pulled into a gas station, and there was this 20-some-year-old man driving in this Mustang with his mother, and immediately he walked out of the gas station, coming directly up to our car. Well, Chris,
flashing gang signs at me.
Yes, Chris blocks him in, blocks the car in, so they can't pull out. And he is saying some vulgar
Not Chris's,
things
the other guys.
to me, and Pastor is wanting to get out of the car and...
let me just tell the truth. You're trying to protect me. Here's what happened was I jumped out the car, okay?
Yes.
Gas station parking lot. I'm ready to roll. He's threatening my wife. He's showing gang signs. I don't know what the heck the kid's problem is. You know, I jump out of the car and ask him, do you have a problem? And then he proceeds to tell me what he's about to do to me. And so then I just shut up, because when it's on, it's on. And I start walking to him. He looks like a grown man. I mean, he's tall, he's got tats, he's tatted up. And his mother screams out of the car, please don't. He's only 17. And then I hear 2 things. 1, jail, okay? I avoided that when I was younger. I don't want to go back, okay? Number 2, I hear the Holy Spirit say, this is a young man that's in desperate need of help. And so then I grab him and say, come here and let me talk to you before you lose your life here. Let me tell you a little bit of wisdom, you know. And I take him off to the side. I try to talk to him, talk sense into him, calm him down a little bit. What's going on, man? What's happened in your life? He just got a juvie, he's this, that, and the other. I said, okay, listen, bro, I've been there, I've done that. And he said, I said, but I went to the Marine Corps. That helped change my life around. But the number one thing that helped change my life around over everything was God. And I just started trying to be an evangelist like I typically would do. And then he tells me, oh, you was a Marine. And I said, yeah. He said, so you think you're bad? Let's do this. And he shoves me. And he stands back doing all of the Sugar Ray Leonard stuff he watched on TV somewhere. And then it's back on.
So can I take it from
Yep.
here? So I get in front of Pastor because I know he's not going to physically put his hands on me. So I'm begging him, honey, do not lay your hands on this kid. The mom is begging me to move the car. I'm saying, look, lady, you don't understand. If I step out of the way, what's going to happen to your son? So eventually I get Chris into the car, thank God. But I still could not help when he was getting in the car. I rolled down my window. Once I knew Pastor was set and ready to put the car in drive, I rolled down that window and I said, oh, little boy, you have no idea I just saved your life. But the point being to all that is it's not just pressing your husband's or wife's buttons. It's also knowing what other people can press their buttons. Protect them from that as well.
It's diffusing each other's buttons, right? So that situation, listen to this. This is crazy. I think I told that story maybe at the church at one point.
I
but
don't think so.
I don't know. Maybe I didn't. But let me tell you how crazy this is, okay? It was a trap from the enemy. If I would have put my hands on that guy, later the police told me I would have been completely in the right because he threatened my wife. And the cameras showed it. Later I was told you would have been okay. It doesn't matter if he was 17 or not, you'd have been okay. I was like, dang, But anyway, but I don't want to unleash that beast. That beast has been, he's gone long away. And but here was the other thing. If I would have did that, how could I pastor this church? Beating some teenager down in the parking lot. Because I don't stop when I'm started. Do you follow what I'm saying? And who knows what would have happened that night. And then here's how crazier it is. We drive back in the development that we live in, and we pass the car with him and his mom getting out. They live just the street, on the same street as us, just a couple blocks down from us. No, it was no mistaking the car. It was actually a Mustang. It was a Monte Carlo, really nice old 60 or 70 Monte Carlo. But anyway, with that said, there was a trap for the enemy waiting there. Are you hearing me? And Melissa, over even me obeying God, Melissa stood between me and potentially destroying my entire future. And that's what we should do for one another. Not necessarily in all those volatile situations. Hopefully we won't face them, okay? So let me get into this now. We're going to break this down, and we're going to talk about it, husbands and wives. So we've talked about a general understanding of how to fight fair. But let's talk about the responsibility that we have, because when we understand the why behind the what, when we understand the responsibility that we've been given by God and how God has called us to act towards one another, man, it's a game changer for each and every one of us. So look at number 1 with me. For men, this is for you. Take great care of your wife. Take care of her. Guard her, protect her, love her, watch over her. Colossians 3:19. Husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. Holy shamoly. How often should men never treat their wives, or how often should men treat their wives harshly? Never. Can I hear all the men say it on 3? 1, 2, 3. Never. Never. Now, of course, you're not perfect, and we get that. But that doesn't give you an excuse not to give it your absolute best try and to fix things in your life that you need to fix to avoid treating your wife harshly. Never treat your wife harshly. Look at 1 Peter 3:7. In the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be physically weaker than you. When Peter was writing this, Texas wasn't birthed yet, So this doesn't maybe apply all times, but she may be physically weaker than you. But listen to this. But she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. She's not your subject. She's not your slave. She's not your gopher. She's your equal. Are you hearing me? Yeah. Treat her as you should. This is Jesus speaking right now through the Apostle Peter. Treat her as you should, so your prayers will not be hindered. One translation says, so your prayers will not go unheard. So let's peel that backwards. Your prayers will go unheard if you mistreat your wife. Your voice will fall on deaf ears to God because he's not going to answer your prayer if you can't even care for the one gift that he's given you, which is the greatest gift next to salvation in this earth. Are you hearing this? This takes men to be able to walk through this. We've got to mature. We've got to grow up. We've got to walk the high road in each and every situation. We'll talk about it here in a minute. Melissa's going to talk about it even more when it comes to the wife's role. But the bottom line is this, guys. You may be stronger than her physically. And God has called, and we're going to look at it. God has called you to be the priest of your home. You are the ultimate leader of the home. Women, if you don't like that, you're going to take that up with God. You're equal partners, but when you come to a decision at a point of agreement on disagreement, it's the man's call on what to do. But with that comes great responsibility. Man, you better be right. Are you hearing me? You better not go against her and be wrong. Then you'll lose her trust. Right? So we've got to take great care. Number two, this is how easy it is. Maybe not easy to flesh out, but this is how easy it is to understand what God wants. Love your wife as Christ loves you. That's as simple as it is. Don't you want Jesus to be gracious to you? Don't you want Jesus to be kind to you? Men, we know we're jacked up. We know we could be stupid more times than not. We know we can make a lot of mistakes, but we are hoping within our heart that God is going to be gracious and forgive us. So we want to love our wife as Christ loves the church. Ephesians 5:25. For husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her. So you are called to give up your life for your wife. Are you hearing me? Men, are you with me? You are called by Jesus to give her your absolute best. I'm giving you the absolute recipe, the formula to a healthy marriage. I'm not giving it to you from Chris Gilkey. I'm giving it to you from the word of Jesus himself. He's teaching us how to do this and how to do it the right way. And remember what the definition of love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous, boastful, rude, or proud. Love does not demand its own way. Love doesn't keep record of when it's been wronged. Are you with me? But instead it rejoices when the truth wins out. Love never gives up. Love never loses hope. Love never loses faith. Love endures every circumstance. Love never fails. Are you hearing me? That's what it looks like to love your wife as Christ loves the church. And why should you do that? Number 3, because she is a blessing from God to you. She is a gift to you. Proverbs 18 verse 22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing, and he obtains favor from the Lord. You got favor on your life just because you're married to your wife. She brings favor into your life from God. This is just a cool thing. I know a lot of us have single friends. When you got a single woman that's desperately trying to seek a husband, tell her to cool her heels, because it's he who finds a wife that finds a good thing. Are you hearing me? This is so critical. Melissa is a gift. I get tears in my eyes every time I think about it. I couldn't be the man that I am today without her. I wouldn't be saved today without her. I couldn't pastor a church without her. I couldn't raise a child without her. I couldn't be even a good friend to people without her. I couldn't be a decent human being without her. Of course, all glory goes to God, but she is also a representation of the glory of God in my life. And I recognize that. And in the beginning, it may not have looked like that all the time. It may not have felt like that all the time. But when I stood on God's word, and when I treated her the way that God called me to treat her, not the way I thought she deserved to be treated, not the way that I thought it was the best way according to, Hip Hop Atlanta on how to treat my wife. You watch those shows, you're going to have a lot of dysfunction in your marriage because you're going to get a lot of stupid ideas of what real love is. Are you with me? Yeah. Melissa watches those shows sometimes. I walk down and just shake my head.
Not all
and she
of
watches
those.
it for entertainment. She's like, she just laughs at them. But with that said, folks, hear me and hear me clearly. Your wife, men, she's a gift from God to you. Treat her as such. Yes. Baby?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And in turn, I feel like the same should stand for treating your husband like a king. If you both do that, then it's a beautiful thing. But I know the feeling of how I feel. And this isn't to put pressure on men or pressure on women. I'm just saying I know how I feel to wake up in the mornings. This is just me being the truth of our marriage. It's not to make us sound like, whatever. But I will literally at times wake up to like the recording of a background of his phone where people are applauding and he is saying, "Hail to the Queen. The Queen is ready to wake up." And I feel like as a woman, we should be treated as queens, yes, the same as we should treat our husbands as kings. And in that, we should take that seriously, not just in the home, but how we represent ourselves outside the home. We should be aware of the way that we dress. Like when I get ready Sunday mornings, I'm thinking of all I want is for Christopher to notice me. I'm not dressing for anybody else. I'm dressing. And on a Sunday morning, believe me, it's hard to get this man's attention with what he is focused on. But I'm getting ready with every thought of, I hope Christopher notices me today after 25 years later. And as for treating your husband like a king, whatever his love language is, yet he should be honored in his home. I think that marriage is a forerunner. Marriage is a forerunner for the way that we will serve. It's just a pre-race for the way that we will serve God in heaven. He's just using a natural thing to show us the way that we will actually serve him.
It's your turn for wives.
Yes, thank you. Wives, place yourself under your husband's authority. Authority, I think a lot of times we know the story of Chris first getting saved, and he came into me and he told me, "You will submit, woman." And, I had been to church with Candace for 4 or 5 years prior, so that's another topic where if you're used to running the home spiritually and then your husband gets everything right, well, it is time for him to run it spiritually. But I said, I will. Go back and finish reading. He did realize to come back into me right. But we are to place ourselves under submission, and that is an option. Submission is the option to place yourself underneath someone.
Let me just read this for them.
Yes.
Ephesians 5:22 through 24. For wives, this means submit to your husbands. And what Melissa said is that submission is not a slave. Submission is not a gopher. Submission is choosing on your own free will that you are going to place yourself under your husband's authority. Hear this now. as to the Lord. For a husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church.
Yes.
He is the Savior of his body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. And we'll talk about that a little bit deeper at the very end of this session, but
Okay.
you can expand on it a little bit if you want.
I just want to say that wisdom, yes, is definitely in that God sees you two as a couple, but the man makes the ultimate decision in the end. So you're often not going to agree, but the man does get the ultimate decision once you give your opinion. And I feel like oftentimes a man may make a decision that still will turn out the way that you predicted it would turn out. But when you look back, there's a reason why he made that decision. It could have been for the other person, their benefit, whatnot. Yeah. And if we'll hit more on it later, then I think that's good for now. Even if he isn't living up to his end, you will be the example. This is the scripture that I lived off of until Pastor got on track with his life. In the same way, you wives must accept the authority of your husbands. Then even if some refuse to obey the good news, your godly lives will speak to them without any words. They will be won over by observing your pure and reverent lives. Thank you, honey. Not used to looking at that. So that's the best thing, is to not nag your husbands on getting it right, getting it spiritually right, because your example is going to set everything. If you still treat them right, if you still honor, respect them, even when they're not living for Christ, it's going to be the best example that you could set to win them over for Christ.
Yeah, and I'll add to this. You know, most of you know our story, maybe a lot of you don't, but you know, I led Melissa to Jesus before I was ever saved. I just heard the gospel, believed it was true, just didn't think Jesus wanted to use anybody like me. I told her the truth. She got saved right after high school, and then she prayed me into the kingdom of God. And I begged her for 5 years. I begged her to leave me. I felt like she deserved somebody better than me. She was a good Christian woman. She was living such a pure life, and I was watching the purity of her life. I was watching her lay down all the things we used to do together as teenagers and refuse to do them with me anymore. And I'd tell her, please, honey, go, leave, find somebody better. You deserve somebody better. And she would tell me every day, I'm not giving up on you, and I'm not giving up on the call that God has on your life. And through that, listen to this, I'm going to tell you from a man's perspective. Yes, I had this amazing encounter with Jesus, which was the ultimate end of my old life and the beginning of my new life. But it was years of watching her purity, her live for God, her not harping on me, I'm the one that led her to Jesus. She wasn't trying to say, oh, you're going to hell, you're doing this, you're doing that. None of that stuff. She just let her actions speak louder than her words. And I was blown away by it. And it was intriguing to me, and it was a mystery to me, and it was exciting to me in some ways. I just would never admit it. Number 3.
Whatever you do, don't nag your husband. Proverbs 21:19. It is better to live alone in a broken down shack than share a mansion with a nagging wife. A nagging wife, Proverbs 21:19. A nagging wife is like the drip, 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 drip of a leaky faucet. You can't turn it off, and you can't get away from it. To me, that just speaks for itself, and it's so sad that if we're women, that we don't understand the way a man's mind must be made, but God does. Because if he is literally saying those references a man would rather do than hear his wife nag, that means his mind is working like, yeah, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to lose my mind. So nagging your husband is definitely not the route to take. It's biblical. And
yeah, and I would say, you know, this is, I did some research on this, and this is really, it's a fun thing in psychology. they teach this away from Christian counseling. And in psychology, they teach us very, 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 very strongly, because the way that a man is made up and the way that a man is wired, remember, he sees everything in compartments. And what nagging does is nagging smashes the waffle. Nagging dumps spaghetti all over the waffle, and no man wants to eat his waffle with spaghetti on top of it. Are you with me? And so now I want to bring a little bit of balance this and back the ladies up just a little bit, because I do understand, because the number one question always comes up with this, but what happens when he just doesn't do what he promised that he's going to do? Then have a conversation with him, an honest conversation. Honey, can we talk? Yes. You've promised that you were going to do these things, and I'm not trying to nag you, but I mean, it's been months and these things still are not done. Can we set a date? Can we set a timeline? Whatever that is, but have an open conversation. Doesn't mean you can't never talk about it. You're supposed to zip your lip and never mention anything when he just, that's not, but it's just not the do you know what I mean? Anybody been there? I think the men will say yes, but if you weren't here, ladies, they would. Okay? But that's a natural thing. So these are just 2 scriptures, but there's really like 7 throughout the Bible that speak so strongly. One of them says it's better to eat a crumb of bread in the corner of an attic than sit at a feast with a nagging wife. So there's apparently something that God has wired within women that they're going, I'll tell you what it is. When man fell, when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, God spoke curses over men, curses over women, and curses over Satan. And one of the curses over women was that no matter what, you're always going to want to control your husband. But I've called him to be the head of you. Are you hearing me?
And that's not Old Testament.
I mean, it is Old Testament, but it's not just that's Old Testament. That doesn't apply for today. The curse is there. It's up to you to allow God to deliver you from it. Are you with me? Jesus already broke the curse at the cross, but it's up to us to receive that freedom of it. Are you with me? So this is the last point, then we're going to take a session. It's not really a point, just a general thing to sum everything that we talked about in how to fight fair. Here's the truth, folks. Good old words of Rob Bass. It takes 2 to make a thing go right. Are you with me? That's really what it takes. Ephesians 5:21. And further, submit. Here it is, boys. Submit to one another. It ain't just her job to submit to you. We submit to one another in all things that we do. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. But the bottom line is when does it mean that I'm the head? It means that when you can't submit to one another because you're in disagreement. Here's what I always tell people. Pause and pray. When you don't have agreement in your marriage, pause and pray. Don't make any rash decisions. And then if you still come back and you have disagreement, then come together and say, this is not working. We can't see eye to eye on this, but that's where it is the man's job to step up and say, okay, honey, this is what we're going to do. But it takes 2 to make a thing go right. There's times, more times than I could ever count, where we are trying to make a decision, and Melissa will say to me, honey, I know in my spirit, I know in my heart, this is the right thing. And I don't feel that in the beginning, but I'll pause and I'll pray. And the Holy Spirit will speak to my heart, and he'll nudge me and tell me, she's right. And then I'll come back and say, honey, we're going to go with what you thought. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know of any time off the top of my head ever that it's not been right. And then there's times where I've had to say, honey, I know in my heart, even though you don't see this, I know in my heart, this is what we're going to do. I'll give you this just fun story as we wrap it up. When we moved to Youngstown, from Columbus back up to Youngstown where we're from, I bought a house that was built in 1934. It looked like it was built in 1934. Okay? And it looked like the Clampetts were living in it since 1934. But the outside had been remodeled. They had a brand new roof, brand new vinyl siding on it, all new windows. So I knew the inside just needed some TLC. And I saw this vision for the house. I went up without Melissa. I'd been commuting back and forth, and I went up and I'd already signed the papers. I signed the contract. She comes up and she wants to see the house, and the realtor lets us in. We're walking around the house. All of a sudden, it's like back in the old days. Melissa
But
just
I
disappeared.
just want to add, I should say that I have never, believe it or not, I've never once been interested in picking a house. I don't want the process. I always let him pick because I always know I could decorate it and make it the way that I want.
This house was that
but
bad.
This house was different.
Okay. She walks out, she just gone. Me and the realtor are talking. She's like, "Where'd your wife go?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I start calling for her. Wasn't a big house. I'm looking up, no baby, no baby. I go out back. I find her seated on this nasty old brick stone thing they had out there, and she's just bawling her eyes out. I hate it. I don't want to live there. And I said, "Baby, just trust me. By the next time," because we were still living in Columbus, "by the next time you come in, you're going to be in love with this place." She's like, "You're crazy. There's no way." She's like, "I don't want to buy it." And I said, "Well, honey, I'm already not buying it, you know?" We bought it. We remodeled it. And to this day, it has been her most favorite house that we've ever lived in. So much that we've kept it as a rental house because it's that nice of a house now. So in the end, there's times where we just got to make that judgment call, but there's also times where we've got to submit to our wives and let them make the judgment call, because maybe they're seeing something we're not seeing, or maybe they know a little bit more than we don't know, or maybe God's just given them the direction. Are you with me?
But
All
can
right.
I add
Yes.
one more thing? But I would say this to men, that if you are all the time making your choice off your wife's suggestion or what she thinks, and that's your decision all the time, then I would say seek God's face on that one.
Yeah, very good. All right, look, we're going to do this. We're going to take an 8-minute break. It's 11:02. We're going to go to 11:10. We're going to come back together. We're going to knock out session 3 and 4. They're shorter. They're pretty direct, pretty to the point, a lot of fun in it. So go ahead, grab a water, take a bathroom break, grab something out there to eat if you need to. We'll see you back in at 11:10, and we'll do more giveaways at 11:10, and we'll kick off the next session at 11:45.